Welcome to Oh Hell No with Nicole.
Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today we have Joe Calderwood. Did I say that properly?
It's actually Calderwood.
Calderwood. See, thank you for correcting me. Joe Calderwood. He is an author, an entrepreneur, and we're going to find out all the other things that he does. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
First thing I wanted to ask you is, what made you become a CPA? Is it something you always wanted to do, or did you just fall into it? Like, how did that all come about?
It really came about because I loved math. I didn't like much else in school, and my best friend and I in 10th grade went to career night at our school, Southdale High School down in Homestead, Florida, and a CPA came to speak. And we thought, well, it looks like he's got some money, and maybe we should try that. And that's how it kind of started, and knew nothing about even what a CPA really did. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to be an airline pilot, was my passion.
Wow.
And was trying to figure that out. But there was some turns and twists and this and that. Started college, had to work my way through it, and decided, you know what, this pilot thing's not going to work. I'm going to fall back on the CPA deal. Loved math, so maybe that'll work. And it actually has been was a good move for me.
Yeah, I always feel like I love people that are accountants and CPAs and that stuff, because I'm not that good at math. And one time I took a course in high school. It was an accounting course, and it was terrible. I did a terrible job. So I have a lot of respect for people who deal with numbers all day and are good at it. And it's a respectable career. It's a good, you could make a lot of money being an accountant, or, once you have your CPA.
I never thought I was a salesperson, marketing material or whatever, but I realized I got out of college, worked for a CPA firm for 2.5 years, and then passing the CPA exam. Mm-hmm. What would have been, if it was legal, would have been my father-in-law that owned the bank in town, encouraged me to go in business for myself. Mm-hmm. And I never mind. I loved working. So I saw the opportunity, and it was great. And what it was I enjoyed the work because I liked the people, and I was able to communicate with them, help them. Let's say some probably thought I didn't help them much, but I liked that. And I've been self-employed, since I was 25 years old. And that led into other business. I've had 7 other businesses.
I know. I want to talk to you about that. So it says that, I read a little bit about you. It says that you're a serial entrepreneur owning a total of 7 businesses. And I was going to ask you, how old were you when you started your first business? So tell us a little bit about that.
What wasn't included in the 7, as I got to thinking about it, was when I was in 11th grade, is I had an 80-mile paper route, 80 miles in the countryside south of Miami, and I would get up at 2:30 in the morning, and I'd get back home about 6:30 after delivering about 400 and some papers, the Miami Herald. And so that was being self-employed, never thinking about that so much, but just a few months ago I was talking to somebody. And what that meant was I took this paper route over from another guy that was 2 years older than me that had gone away to college, and I used to substitute the route for him. Mm-hmm. And it actually was profitable. And imagine a 17, 18-year-old kid getting up at 2:30 in the morning to drive over to a gas station to pick up 400 papers and drive 80 miles to deliver them to 400 people and get back home and then be at school at 7:30.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That was my first. So I had something in me that was willing to do whatever to get ahead. And so that was probably my first legitimate business, let's say. Mm-hmm. I mean, I mowed yards and other things, but that was a business. I probably did that for about a year. And so I think it's the entrepreneur. I see something. It's just like in me, entrepreneurs and all the real estate I've ever purchased projects I've done is property people didn't want. Somehow I had this drive, this vision or something. I'd see a property and I think, that could really be this or this. Just like right now, I have this development in North Carolina. Nobody wanted it. The bank had taken it back. I bought a home in it, and I was told the bank was going to get rid of it. And I thought, well, I'll buy it because I see the potential, and I love it. I've had it 5 years. So I started out, it's at least 7 businesses, probably even more.
Wow. So what do you think has always inspired you to just go out there and take these things over that people, like you said, people didn't want them, but you saw something in it and you took it over? Is it being financially like independent? Is it just having your own business, like not having to work for anyone? What drives that?
Part of it, the drive was growing up poor, financially poor, a very loving family and all of that, and neighbors and things. But the drive was, what can I do to make money? And so that's where going in business for myself as a CPA was kind of a natural, because I liked the work. And actually, where I was in Homestead, no one else from that area ever had a CPA office there. So I had an advantage because my family had a pretty good name. And I was able to start off in what would have been my father-in-law, push business my way. And I loved working. I mean, I'd go to my CPA office sometimes in tax season at 4:30 in the morning because I knew I had work. Wow. And so it was about the money, being financially independent, how I'm going to get ahead, and having that money to put into something to make more money. It was just in my mind, that's what I'm going to do, no matter what it takes. And so that was the initial drive. And then as I look back, it was also the satisfaction of doing something and being successful and having, not that I craved it, but people recognizing it, saying something, wow, this is amazing what you did. So there were side benefits, but it was really about the money is how I started, as I just wanted to. I grew up around people that had money.
Right.
And I was probably the only kid whose mother worked when I was going to school. Everybody else had a stay-at-home mom and was pretty well off.
Wow. And it's something you said. You said that you would get up early in the morning and open your office or be at work. And that, when you do that, it's more than just the money. It's like you really love and have a passion for what you do, and you want to do it to the best of your ability too. And a lot of people struggle with that, And
the other thing is I had a commitment to my clients. So when I've told this story a few times in the last 6 months, is when I went to the office the first time at 4:30 in the morning. My CPA office, that a lot of people think self-employed, well, I'll go in at 9 and leave at 5. No, that wasn't I'll go in when I need to and I'll leave when I need to. I got to get the work done. It was about the clients. If I made a commitment and I'm going to do your financial statements or your taxes or an IRS audit, I want to be prepared. I want to do the best thing for you. Even though I'm getting paid, I want to do the best job. I don't want to cut corners. And that gives you a feeling of satisfaction, when you look at it. I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah, I love that. So people are usually afraid to start businesses because of the initial investment. Do you have any advice that you would share with budding entrepreneurs about that whole fear of just taking that first step?
Yeah, the best advice, because a few years ago, before I bought this development, I would come across people in the neighborhood where I lived, and a few of the people were in business or were starting a business or struggling. And I would tell them, I said, I never really did a formal business plan for any of my businesses. I just had it in my head, and I might have a pad that I'm making notes on about, like, well, if I did this and that would take this, blah, blah, blah. I started volunteering a few years back for an organization called SCORE, and it's SCORE. And these are retired business people that you can go to. They're in most cities. And they will help you. If you've got an idea for a business, they will help you sort out what you need to look at and help you develop a business plan so you can see it and look at, is this reasonable to think I can quit my job and start this business? A lot of people, that's not true. because the first book I was ever going to write, and I never wrote it, was going to be called Time for Success. It was going to be nonfiction, and it meant time for success is anybody can be successful. The key factor is time. And then under time, so can your idea and your business be successful in a month, in a year, in 3 years, whatever? And once you figure that out, if it's going to be a year, how are you going to survive over that year? Money-wise, where's the money going to come from to fund your lifestyle and invest in the business if you've got to put money into the business for equipment or whatever it is? So the best advice I can tell people is see if there's a SCORE organization near you, because it's free advice. You can go in for an hour appointment, tell them, and then they'll give you some homework to do, and eventually you would begin on a business plan. Plus there's all kinds of courses they can give you about running a business or developing a business or any of that. So that's one good thing you could do to help yourself see if you can make this idea turn into a successful business.
That's great advice. Thank you, Joe. So what is the most challenging part of starting businesses for you?
Probably the unknown of starting a business is, even though I just talked about a business plan, is it is not going to go exactly as you predicted, and it's probably not going to be as easy as you're thinking, or the timing's not going to be like you thought. So you've got to have what I call tenacity, is so you put all your time in thinking about this business. I'm going to do it now. I've got to quit my job and I'm going to devote myself to it. Is what's going to happen if you don't get that account that you needed for making money or sell that product, or the marketing's not working? What are you going to do? You've got to be able to be honest with yourself, really. And I've done it myself. I've made big mistakes, and I have to sit there and relook at it like, okay, admit this was really stupid what I did, but what am I going to do to pick this up and move on? And that's why I use the word tenacity, because that is a big thing, to just not give up. If you've got a really good plan and you've thought it out, there's got to be a way to make it work. And that's usually, I've never really given up. I've sold a business to somebody that thought they could do it better than me, but I've never given up. And sometimes maybe I should have, but I just wasn't going to do it.
That's definitely true. I read someplace that a lot of people fail with things that they start because they don't put in enough time. They want things fast, and because it doesn't happen the way they thought it was going to happen, they abandon the idea altogether. So.
They do. They want to, and it seems more so nowadays than back. Figure it was 1973 when I opened my first CPA business, and so I think it is a thing where people are not willing to say, it's going to take me a year to get to where I want to go, and I can't do that.
Yeah.
It's got to be a month or whatever, and that's just not reasonable. And I saw that a lot with SCORE when I'd have people come in. They would say, I want to start a restaurant, 200-seat restaurant, and da-da-da-da-da, and I'd just let them tell me everything that was going on in their head, and I'd write notes. And when do you think this is going to be successful? Well, once everything's there and whatever, just open the doors and those 200 seats are going to be filled. That's not realistic. 50 seats are going to be filled, and not every day. And just imagine the complexity of that you're guessing 200 seats or 50 seats, the people you've got to have there helping you, the tables, the furniture, the supplies, the food, all those things. You've got to be a pretty smart person, which is just about like any business, of how you're going to pull all that together. And that's where some people might have to have a partner, to help with developing something.
Yeah, absolutely. So what business do you love being involved with the most?
Well, right now I have this development in North Carolina that I have built 22 homes since I took this over 5 years ago, and we've got about 20 to go. I love it And again, I did it because I saw there was a major potential there for financial reward, but I just saw how this development could be finished.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was a mess. There weren't roads finished, sewer and water weren't in, electricity wasn't in, streets weren't paved. There wasn't even a dirt road for some of the streets. I just had this vision of like, I can do it. It's going to take some time. So I love it because I've seen now how I've come over all of that initial stuff, the infrastructure, building homes. The first 6 homes I built, I lost money on every one of them, but it was just a matter of building up that momentum. That's what I love, is seeing it turn into a successful venture. Plus, another business I have now, it's an IT business I own in England. We're a distribution company, is constantly working with the people as far as what are we going to do now? How are we going to make it better? And I was explaining today to some of the management team in there, we're talking about the bottom line of the business. There's 2 ways to increase that bottom line. You increase your revenues or decrease your expenses. It's pretty simple. And you just look at it, and then you have key things like you always want to buy more things. It's like I said in this business, we don't work on wants, we work on needs. Do we really need it? If we don't, we're not doing it. I don't care what it is or what you think it's going to do. We don't need it, not happening. So I just love that part. It doesn't have to be that I had an assisted living with my mother that her and I developed into a 66-bed facility, a restaurant I owned, a CPA practice, the consulting business I had, the IT business I had in Florida, the IT business I have in England, this development I have here, the book writing as a business, all of those things. It's the excitement of seeing something happen with it, really.
Yeah, I'm excited just listening to this.
Oh, good.
So how do you?
I think I could be a motivation speaker.
Yes, you should add that to your, resume.
Yeah, I should.
So how do you decide what to get involved in?
Well, after college, having my degree in Bachelor of Business Administration with a major in accounting, that first decision after working for that CPA firm is I really got it figured out. After the first year of working there, this company that I worked for, they were really tough on me. Mm-hmm. But it was a good thing because it really woke me up. And I became a really good accountant. And so when I decided to go in business for myself, it wasn't a matter of, like when I worked for that CPA firm, I could call in sick, if I wasn't feeling well, or I worked from 9 to 5:30 or something. If I worked more, I got overtime. It was like, hey, bring it on. I want to work all the overtime I can when I'm going into business for myself. And how often did I call in sick? Very seldom, because if I'm not in the office, I'm not making money. And I forget what the question was now.
I asked you, how do you decide what business ventures you get into? Like you have a very diverse situation going on here.
So this is interesting. So I have my CPA business, started it in 73. And because I told you a little bit about the real estate, I just had an eye for property that I thought could be valuable. And there was a motel in town, and I'm thinking this is about 4 years later, because every year I would buy a piece of property, and from after tax season. So I'd take a certain amount of extra money I'd made, and I'd put a down payment on a property. You'd have to put 20% down to buy, and I'd buy commercial property. And then the bank had financed the other 80%. So I'm thinking it was about 77, so 4 years after I started business for myself. It was the biggest venture I had done, and I bought this motel that nobody wanted. It was run down, but it was on a great corner, and I just saw something about it. And my mother was a nurse and working in a boarding home, or what they called ACLF at the time, which is in Florida, Adult Congregate Living Facility, and now what they call assisted living. So I was talking to the banker, and he was saying, yeah, that would probably be a smart move to buy that property. And my mom said, well, why are you buying it? And I said, well, I think it'd be ideal. It's got all these rooms. They all have plumbing in them. And we can convert some of the other to kitchens and office and living areas and turn it into our own boarding home, assisted living, whatever you want to call it. And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, you don't have to worry. I'll do the business end and you can do the medical end. And that's how we started. It was that simple of a initial thought and seeing how it came together. So I did buy that motel, and I let it run as a motel for about 2 years, I think, until we were ready to start this business. And that's how that business began. And we built it up and sold it and made a pretty nice profit. And that's kind of how it would go. It's like I'd see something, I think, I think I could do that. And I just have to find the right people. And like in that particular instance, the right person was my mother. I mean, we know each other well. And so it was a pretty good system. And I did that with other things. I had a wholesale plant nursery I'd started in Florida. This property I'd bought originally was 20 acres, had a home on it, and I traded some other property for it. And I wanted to build a horse barn because we had horses. When I had all that property, I thought, well, there's got to be something else you can do with the property. And I started thinking about, I loved outside things that I would, what about a nursery of some kind, plant nursery? Started looking around, and I started growing azaleas. Now, I didn't know anything about growing azaleas, but I found out everything that I could, and I hired somebody to work for me to help manage it. And I built it up to where I was a wholesale grower. I was supplying stuff to Disney World, a lot of the subcontractors that dealt with Disney in Central Florida, up to North Florida, Jacksonville, down to West Palm, big developments down there. Just all I grew were azaleas. And I learned it because I have this passion. It's probably because I have these conditions that people think are negative. Maybe I'm obsessive compulsive. Mm-hmm. And I really think every successful businessman is obsessive compulsive, because you're constantly thinking, how can I make this better? What do I need to do now? Why did I do that? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I built that nursery up in a few years to where I'd be in a huge trade show in Orlando, and did my own marketing. I realized that, I probably can do all this myself. I don't need somebody else marketing me. I can market myself. And I would just stand in the booth and people would come up and say, hey, you got 3,000 of these plants? I said, yeah. And that was pretty easy. I took good material there, and I love it. It's exciting.
Yeah. Wow. So, Stained Fortune is your first novel.
Right.
What made you decide to write this book?
Well, what made me decide to write Stained Fortune is I was going to write nonfiction of my story growing up and a little bit about my mother. Mm-hmm. And so we had moved to Mexico about 12 years ago, and it forced me to kind of cut back on being so involved in things. I still had a business in Florida, but I let the guys that work there run it. I'd go up once a month. So when I was in Mexico, I met some writers, and I started telling some stories about how I grew up. And they said, you want to write that down. That's some pretty interesting stuff. And so I began on that, and I wrote what was going to be nonfiction. I wrote all of this stuff without thinking of how it's ever going to be edited or how it's organized. No writing courses, no nothing, just all this stuff coming out of my head. And this is what a friend of mine that's another writer said, well, basically what you did then was a brain dump. And so I just wrote and wrote. I bet I wrote 300 pages. Well, what happened is half of that was not even true, because I'd write and then I thought, well, it's going to sound a little more exciting if I say this about it. And so it wasn't going to really be a memoir. By the time we moved from Mexico back to the States, we moved to this area, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and there's a college here for seniors, and I took 2 writing courses there. One was nonfiction and one was fiction. So I had all this stuff I'd written and went to the classes, and I found out I really loved the fiction class because it just was so easy. It's like, well, okay, I can make things up. I mean, it is based on some real events, but you can spice it up, and who cares because it's fiction. And so that's kind of how it began, by me wanting to write nonfiction and turned into fiction. And while I was in the fiction class, we'd have to write short stories. And I started this as a short story, and the original title was The Second Time I Went to Prison. Well, I was so excited about it that when I would read it, people say to me, you've been to prison? And I said, no, it's fiction. I've never been to prison.
I was about to ask you.
Yeah, I've never even come close to going to prison. But that was because the teacher had said, instead of the first time I did this or that or whatever, we need another idea for everybody to have assignment. So we came up, well, what about the second time we did something? So that was how it started. So I was thinking, the second time I went out on a date, or the second time, I did this or that. And then I thought, oh my gosh, you want something that'll really snag people. What about the second time I went to prison? And that's all it took was that title. And I just started writing. Wow. And that's where this Stained Fortune came from, because it was just a short story. And after the class was over, there was about 6 of us that would meet once a week, and then it went to once a month, and then it stopped altogether. But that kind of kept me going as far as writing. And I wrote this whole thing, and it was overwhelming, really. But that's kind of how it began.
So do you know any drug dealers?
Not like these in the book. I met some of my clients when I was in Homestead that had dealt in transporting pot.
Okay.
I didn't know it at the time that they were doing it, but it was like a light bulb went off because I was at this couple's house. They were about my age, and I'm guessing maybe it was in the mid-70s, and this was, back in the 70s. In Miami area was probably not unusual.
Yeah.
So this client that I thought was a really straight-laced guy, him and his wife had invited me over for drinks and to see their new home. And they'd spent $300,000 building this house and had not gotten a mortgage on it. Well, I do their tax return, and I thought I wasn't going to ask any questions, but I thought, I don't know where they got that cash from.
Right.
But it wasn't their business, or they didn't report it. They made good income, but nothing like that. Mm-hmm. They were kind of bragging about, how much it cost. I never said anything about it. And while they're there, they asked me if I wanted to smoke a joint. And I said I did. I would. And they start telling me, well, they knew I had a pilot's license. So what happened, to answer your question, is they said, would you be interested in making $50,000? And I said, yes, I would. In a short period of time, absolutely. Because at that time, maybe I made $50,000 a year working my butt off.
Right.
And what it was is, if I would fly a load of pot from Mexico to Homestead, I could make $50,000. I didn't do it. Oh. I thought about it, but probably I would have gotten caught, or something would have happened, or they could have been setting me up.
Yeah.
And I would have lost my CPA license. I would have been convicted of felony, but in jail. Basically, I wouldn't do anything for money.
Yeah. So
I did entertain the idea. So I did know somebody dealing in drugs, yes.
So you said you always wanted to be a pilot. You didn't become a pilot, but you did go and get your pilot's license.
Yeah, I started out in college in a pilot program, and so I got my license. Oh, and what happened is the Vietnam War was going on, and a good friend of mine a friend of our family's that lived out in the area told me, he said, you're never going to get a job with the airlines. I actually remember standing there when he told me that, so I'm like 19 or something. Mm-hmm. This convenience store out in the country. His name was Bill Raven, and he said, yeah, you'll never get a job with the airlines. He was with Pan Am Airlines. And I said, why? And he said, because they're hiring people with jet time from Vietnam. And, with your hours you'll have in from going to school, there's no way you're ever going to get a job. And I realized that. That's when I thought, wow. The other thing I did is I thought, then maybe I should investigate getting in the service. I mean, how stupid is that? But anyway, that's what I thought about. I had 3 older brothers. One was in the Air Force in Vietnam. I had two older than that were in the Coast Guard. So I thought I went to the Air Force, talked to them about it, wanted to get in the pilot program. They said I could. And when they started testing me, it turned out, because I thought, wow, with my associate degree, which I think was the case, that I could go in as an officer in the Air Force and be a pilot. But when they put me through more extensive tests on my eyes, it turned out I had a color deficiency. I wasn't colorblind, but I had a color deficiency. And it disqualified me as being a commercial pilot for the airlines.
Wow.
So that's really what happened. Because I thought, wow, wouldn't that be something? be
Yeah.
a pilot wearing that nice looking
Uniform.
uniform, and
Yeah.
all the women would be chasing after me, and I'd
Yep.
be making good money. How exciting would that be?
I know.
Happen. It's probably the best thing.
Yeah, it's everything happens as it should, you know?
Yeah, it does.
Is your main character anything like you? Are there any similarities at all?
Yeah, there is. Clint Kennedy
Mm-hmm.
is an opportunist.
Yes.
He will do virtually anything for money. Just I do have my limits. He doesn't, but I can see that. So a lot of that can, and I've had a lot of people say, "Well, you've written about yourself." People I've known for a long time, and I said, "Well, kind of. There is a lot of similarities. Yes, the drive for getting ahead and all of that."
Okay.
And see, I portray Clint Kennedy, this character, as growing up with not much, and his friends around him had money, and his best friend, and how they were together all this time, and then the gay thing, I'm gay.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a cool thing to be gay in the 70s. And but anyway, this book takes place in the early 2007, which still, that still is an issue. But yeah, there is a lot of similarities of Clint and myself.
I'm reading the book. I'm still working my way through it. I love this book. When I'm reading it, it feels like I'm watching a movie. Like you're so detailed in the way you explain everything. It's just really, really good. Like at first when I started reading this, I was like, wait a minute, this is this guy's life? Hold on. And then I read the back and I was like, oh, okay. Because it just seems so authentic. It's like I'm like all in. I can't wait to find out what happens. I'm at the part where they're making the money transfers, and then he's talking about how, he's feeling very uncomfortable with his partner that he's working with,
Oh.
I think it's a great book. I could see this being a movie.
I know, it's interesting. That's what I want to have happen.
Yeah, I could totally see it.
And now my second book, it's finished. It'll probably come out in about 3 months. It's going to be called Money Faucet. It actually, I know I wrote this. It is better than the first book.
Really?
I love it. And now I'm starting on the third. Now to explain it, so there's a third book coming out.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote all of this stuff and put it together, it was overwhelming. So I hired an editor. And the first thing the editor says, really what you have here is 3 books. So we started working on dividing it up.
Oh.
So yeah, it's going to be 3 in a series. And it's different than what I'd written. This second one is similar, but there's differences because I get into knowing each character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'm continually thinking about this is what Alvaro is going to do, or Xavier, or Jack, or David, or Candace. I see these people walking around and talking to each other.
Yeah, and that is so difficult. That's the thing about writing that intimidates me. It's just especially writing a novel or something like that. It's how do you keep these people separate, give them their own identities, have them intermingle with each other and create the scene? And it just all seems so overwhelming.
Well, it is. And what I learned from one person in our group that used to meet is outlining things. So I would sit there and outline it and say, okay, well, what do I want Clint to do? What is the end game here? And who does Clint have to have around him? And how much do we need to know about these people? So you kind of bring yourself back to that, because I would get too involved with maybe one character. So that's what I think helps keep you organized, is maybe have an outline of what you're trying to achieve here for the story and for each character, and then how these characters would intermingle with each other and clash with each other. And is there ever going to be a reconciliation, or what is it, or why are they friends, and all that kind of stuff. So I think the outline is the best way to go to, because I think it was 370 pages I had that I had come up with, and I couldn't even think of an ending. It's like, and I read this thing over and over and had notes and would change and move this here. And then I think, good God, now I've got to read it again to see what's going on. And it could drive you mad.
I'm sure, but it is well done. I'm really enjoying this book.
I
So,
appreciate that.
yeah, it's awesome. So, of all the things that you have done professionally, what do you feel is your true passion? Because it seems like you have a lot of passions, which is fine. It's great. But do you feel like there's any one thing that you're totally drawn to more than everything else? Or do you feel like it's evenly shared?
You mean in my career,
Yeah,
my
like all your
businesses?
businesses that you've opened and had, and now you're writing. Like, what do you absolutely love? Like it takes the cake over everything. Or is there nothing? Is it everything?
I'd say everything's equal, and probably what I see now at this stage of my life is if I can make something out of this writing, is that would be exciting to me because I don't see any limit to stories. It's like John Grisham. When I was at the book expo in New York in June or July, whenever that was, I met him and I got my picture taken with him. This was a fluke that this even happened. And I had my book there, and he had his new book, Camino Island. And he says, "What do you want me to write in this?" And I said, "Congratulations, Joe and Gil, on your 37 years." And he's just as normal as we are. He says, "Oh, my wife and I have been together 37 years." And wrote that in there. And congratulations, what do you want to happen in your book? And I said, "I'm hoping I can make it into a movie." And he says, "Hey, if you can get it to the right people, it can be a movie." See, that would just be exciting to see this happen with this stuff I've written.
Yeah, I could
And
definitely see it.
that might be, if that comes about between these three books, that something happens like that, I could see that being really exciting, and it might be a summing up of everything I've done.
Yeah, I would like to see that for you. I think it would be great.
Thanks.
So, what is the most valuable lesson that you have learned to date in terms of business?
Well, I used the word earlier about tenacity, and you also, and honesty maybe is a good one because I've used that word quite a bit lately. I was talking to a water and sewer guy that's putting in more sewer lines for me, and he was talking about business. He's probably 40. And I said, Rhino, the biggest thing is being honest with people. If you make a mistake, you need to tell them that and fix it. And I said, every lesson I've learned has been the hard way. I've maybe resisted and I got hit over the head with a 2x4, but that's just how I learn. And then once I get it, I've got it. And one is the tenacity. You just got to keep moving on. If that was a good idea and you believed in it, you can get there. You just don't know what that path is going to necessarily be. And the other is being honest with yourself and other people you're dealing with, whether it's your customers or vendors or whatever it is, and I'm not saying honest in a way of hurting people, being honest. It's an honest about this is a transaction you and I have, and I've done something, and I've got to admit to you that I didn't do the right thing, but I'm going to fix it for you. That kind of integrity and
Yes.
honesty is a big thing in business, because here's the thing. You're going to build that business up based on how you treat people. And most of my good fortune has been built up on referral or people satisfied with what I did and sending other people to me.
Yeah, that's really
And
important.
yeah.
So, is there any risk that you have taken that you wish you didn't? And if there is, what did you learn from the whole ordeal? Is there any one business venture that you had that went all the way left and you're like, ooh, I wish I...
Yeah, there has been, there was one that I put blinders on. I never had anybody guiding me. I made all my own decisions. So I've always said if I had somebody to tell me, Joe, don't do that, and tell me why, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But I've never had anybody around me to tell me. I just came up with these things on my own. But the risk that I took that really threw me for a curve, and I knew it was a mistake, is I'd bought a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale. And I just thought, this is going to be awesome, because I'd sold that assisted living I'd told you about. And I thought I was really smart because I'd bought this property. We'd put the business in there, and we'd made a really nice profit, my mom and I, on this deal that we had for 3 or 4 years. And so now I thought, well, I can do anything. And there was this restaurant for sale, and I bought it. And I really, if I had paid attention, even as an accountant, I should have known better. But I just wanted it so bad that I did not do the due diligence I should have. And so after about 2 weeks of having it, I realized what a mistake I'd made, but of course would not admit it to anybody. So I was trying to figure out how to fix it. And I did come to the conclusion it wasn't fixable. And the broker that had represented the initial seller when I'd bought it had come by, and I said, and I didn't tell him the truth, but I said, if you have anybody that's interested in it, I've made a mistake. This really isn't for me. Because I had looked at it and I thought, there's no way this is ever going to be profitable. No way, ever. And I was the first person there and the last one there during the day. And in a 2-week period, I lost $10,000. And I thought, I've never lost money in anything. And this is an eye-opener. So it was a risk I took. I was still fairly young. I was probably 32. And I had to eat that. I had to own it. And it was kind of a come down for me admitting it to myself, that I wasn't quite as smart as I thought I was. There are some things that I'm going to have to pay attention to. And I just have to be more thorough in how I look at whatever it is I'm doing and not blunder like that again. So probably learned that from it somewhat. I still was a risk taker, but that was probably the biggest blow up of anything I did.
Wow.
But in the long term, I'm a positive thinker. If I hadn't got that restaurant, the guy that took it from me had no money, but he had a piece of property in Boca Raton. He says, I can trade you that for the restaurant. And that's what I did. As I thought, you know what? I'd rather own that property than that restaurant because this guy says, you don't know what you're doing. And I thought, I'm not going to argue about it. I said, yeah, you're right. I thought, this is what it takes for him to take it. I'll answer anything. And so he took the restaurant. I took the property. And I ended up trading that property for where we moved to Central Florida, where I said I had that 38 acres. I traded that condo partly for that property up in Central Florida, whereas we ended up living for 23 years. So in a way, it all worked out, but it was quite a route to take to get there.
Right. That's
But
so
it's something
amazing.
I shouldn't have done. But that's the thing, when you talk to people, is you can't pick and choose of your past experience. All of those made me the person it made me a better business consultant too.
Right.
Because I opened another CPA practice and I could sit there and tell people, no, you do not want to do that. I tell you from firsthand experience, it's not going to work. You're going to work your butt off and you're not going to make any money. Do you really want to do that? And so it made me a better business person, better consultant, better accountant.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love how that whole restaurant, ordeal got you these other properties. Like you would have never seen that, but that had to happen for you to, get those things. So
It did. Yeah, we would have never ended up in that little area of Titusville. It's where the Space Center is. We never would have gotten that property, and it was a great experience for 23 years.
wow. So it's so funny how you said that he didn't have money, but he had property and he said, I'll give you this for that. So you can actually do that. You don't always need to have like cash up front to start a business or own a business.
Not really. I mean, it just depends on your creativity. So that's what I did. This guy really had virtually no money. I wasn't desperate. I wanted to get rid of it. He didn't know how bad I wanted to get rid of it. So when he finally fessed up and he said, look, I'll buy your place, but I don't have anything, but I have this property in Boca Raton. It was an apartment building that had been converted to condos. So who's my husband now, Gil, him and I were just together for a year then in 1980 and or 81. So I tell him he was flying for National Airlines as a flight attendant at the time, but they were on layoff. So anyway, he was working in the restaurant. So he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go look at this condo that this guy wants to trade me. So he says, can I go? And I said, yeah, we get in the car. And he says, so what would be the determining factor is if you would take that condo and trade for the restaurant. And I said, the determining factor is going to be if that condo's there, I'm taking it. and it was there. It wasn't anything really fancy, but I thought, I can see there's value there and I can do something with it. I'll figure this out.
Wow. Smart.
And that's part of, I made mistakes, own it, and move on.
Right. I think that's the biggest thing. We have to own our mistakes. I was just talking to my sister about that today. It's like, we go through life, we make mistakes. Don't try to sugarcoat your mistakes or, just say, hey, I messed up.
Yeah.
If I would have known better, I would have done better. But this is what I learned from it and move on. Right. It's just better. So,
you and anybody around you. So, so you don't necessarily have to have money, to answer that question. But most of the times you do, or you have to have somebody that has money, a relative or a distant relative or a friend that believes in you and say, I can do this. And that's what helped me too when I got started, is I had clients that believed in me and they would say, well, I'll loan you money to do that.
Wow.
So, there's all of that depending on, who you know.
Yeah, that's just like, I call that divine favor. Like,
it actually is. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Because that's what I say has helped me, is somehow the universe, or whatever you want to call it, brings these things to me, these opportunities, let's say, and the people, and it's all there. And I'm thinking, and I've heard other people say it. Even not long ago, I was watching something, Barbara Streisand was on there, and she said whenever she had a project, all the people that were needed to make it happen all surfaced around. And I think that's what that is there is a connection.
Yeah.
That's not vocal. There is whether it's a vibration or whatever it is, that there's something that responds to your thinking, your bigger mind.
Yes, it's so crazy. I experience it with this podcast because I love talking to all my guests because you guys really inspire me, and I hope that you're inspiring the people that listen, because we're all on this journey and we can all learn something from each other. So I feel like you guys are sent to me from, whatever, God, the divine intervention, the universe, whatever you believe in. I feel the same way. So
now, how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this the way I am doing it today since July of last year.
Okay.
Right. So I had started initially just talking about my experiences just by myself. But then I was like, I really wish that I could talk to people and really find out how they're figuring out their lives. And maybe it would help me figure out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And then I started getting these emails, hey, would you like to interview this person? Would you like to interview this person? I'm like, what did I sign myself up for? How am I getting these emails? And at first I was really nervous because I'm like, I'm not, anybody famous. I'm not anybody with a big podcast that's, well known. So no one's going to want to talk to me. But surprisingly, people were like, sure, I'd love to be on your podcast. And it's just been an amazing adventure for me. So I really love talking to all you guys because now you're a part of my journey.
Right.
So yeah, I really love it and I appreciate it. So I have to ask you, what is the biggest misconception about being an entrepreneur? What do you think owning your own business?
Probably one of the misconceptions is it's an easier life, easier money to make and all of that it's not as hard as working for someone.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest misconception. The other is, whether it's a misconception or not thinking about it, is, when everything goes upside down, it's up to you now to figure it. There isn't somebody above you.
Yeah, you're on your own.
It's all your thing now.
Yeah.
It's like that's quite an experience. And I had that. When I first started my first CPA practice, was like, now I don't have a boss to go to. It's like, oh my God, I'm giving these people advice. And, what if it's not exactly right? Mm-hmm. And there was no internet in 1973.
Yeah.
did invest in some tax books and whatever, but I was winging it a lot of times and just figure, I'm just going to have to deal with it. So probably a misconception is how you're going to be tested. And
Yeah.
it's up to you. You don't have somebody else to rely on to handle things. You've got to handle it.
Yeah, that's a big one. You have to tell us an oh hell no moment that you've had in your life. It could be personal, professional, just a moment where you thought, oh hell no. Like, really? Is this really happening right now?
And you mean like in a negative way?
It could be a positive. It could be like, oh hell no. I can't believe this just happened. This is great. Or it could be like the opposite, you know?
Yeah, I've had several of those. And one is really personal and one is a business thing
Oh,
that come
share.
to mind. The business one was one that ACLF, my mom and I started. And after, I think we had it about 3 years and really doing fine and all of that. And I was even looking at how to expand it, buy other property. And I had a really good relationship with the health department and licensing department in Miami and all of that because when I went to convert this, I just contacted them. I said, I'm going to do this. Would you tell me all the things I need to do? And they did. So I did everything, got my licenses, started the business, got a good reputation. And a couple comes in and said, the health department sent us here, told us about you and that you had started this and we might want to see it because we're thinking about doing this. Would you mind showing us around or letting us look around? And I said, well, if you're starting one in Homestead, not really, because this would be dumb for me to tell you all about my business. I said, no, we're Miami and all this. But I said, oh, okay, well, just go around and, take a look and you can see where the kitchen and where I put the kitchen, dining rooms, TV rooms, and the different residences. And, make yourself, and I'll tell you how I did it. So they come back in and they said, wow, you've done a really nice job here. Have you ever thought about selling it? And I said, yeah, on my price and terms. I just made up a number. And when I threw that number out, they said, we'll buy it. That was like, oh my God.
Yes.
I cannot believe this. And it happened.
Wow.
They bought it and actually paid me a little bit more than I was asking.
That is crazy.
It is.
That's great. That's a great oh hell no moment.
Yeah. It was like, wow. This is the most money I've ever made, and this is wild. I mean, it was like I was delirious. I mean, nobody saw it, but I was delirious. When I went home that night, I was like, wow, I can't believe it. This is what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this money now?
Right.
And, but it was just like that's what happened in that day. Just boom.
I love it.
So I've had a lot of oh hell no moments.
Yes, we all have.
I think a lot of people have. They
Yeah.
just are too busy not thinking about their life experience
Yeah.
to get all the positive things that probably have happened.
Because you're an accountant, I know that you are probably very cautious with your money and you invest and you do, the right things, right?
No,
No?
no.
That's a shock to
I'm
me.
not a typical CPA, so I'm probably a little, I wouldn't say, somewhere between cautious and reckless in between there. Is I'm a risk taker, and most CPAs are not.
Okay, yeah. They're probably like really stacking the chips and like, I'm not spending that or I'm not, So you,
You could lose money on that. Yeah, you could. Or you could make money, and I prefer to make money, so I am going to kill myself and everybody else to get there.
oh my God. So do you splurge? Do you like buy yourself on like a nice car? You're not like driving like a 1999, Camry.
No, so my first splurge, so I told you I started my CPA practice in 73, working my buns off. And so 2.5 years later, December of 75, I bought myself a brand new 76 Corvette. That was my dream car.
Nice.
And I was so excited because I had dreamed about that for probably 10 years. Just, oh my God,
Yeah.
imagine that you would have a car like that. And so that was one big thing. Well, what's interesting is 2 years ago, I was doing really, really good with my development and my company in England. We were just making money hand over fist, and I bought another awesome car. I mean, it was crazy. It was a brand new model of BMW called i8, and it is. I still have it. I mean, it is an awesome car. So I did that.
Nice.
It's crazy.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I like to hear when
Yeah,
people.
and all the people that I'm around, like are these younger guys, 20s, 30s, or whatever, they'll see it at the gym or wherever I'm at or getting gas. It's just a male magnet. So I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
And they say, they'll just, and I'll say, yeah, I got it before I go to the nursing home or before I'm too old to get it, because the doors go up on the sides instead of hinged, as normal cars. And it's a sports car, but I'm healthy and in good shape and all that. But I joke about it, that before I get too old, I'm doing something crazy like this.
Right.
And I'm glad I did it. I said, if I'm on my deathbed and somebody says, hey, are you sorry you got that i8? I'll say, hell no, I'm not.
So do you feel like you are living your best life and living in your passions?
Yes, I do, because also we built our dream home. I've never built a home from scratch. So in this development at the very top of the mountain, we built our own home, and we can sit, and we've lived in it for a year now. We can sit and look 23 miles across the mountains. It's awesome. It's just awesome to have this and know how fortunate I am. I mean, I work for it, but I still am thankful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially where you're coming from,
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
Gosh.
Well, thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your story with us. Can you tell us where we can purchase your book and how we can keep up with all the things that you have going on? Do you have a website, or are you on any social media platforms?
I'm on Facebook, so you can find me on there, and I'm on Instagram as Stained Fortune.
Oh, okay. Great.
But Facebook is under my name, Joe Calderwood. There is another Joe Calderwood, but Joe Calderwood, Asheville, North Carolina. So you can contact me there. The book, you can find it online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's not yet in any bookstores, but my publisher said that this is beginning to happen, because she's got now 6 different books in the crime series. So it'll be the whole crime series going into different bookstores. But right now it'd be online purchase. And you can buy the paperback or you can buy the Kindle version.
Yes, people buy it. It's a great book. It's a good read.
And then the second one's coming out. It's going to be called Money Faucet. And that'll be in a few months. So I'm just putting together all my contacts. And just like you, when that comes out, I'll let you know. And
yes, please do.
Podcast if you want. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And when it becomes a movie, I'll send you free tickets to go to the movie.
You better. You better. Thanks again, Joe.